Hi everyone, this is Stephanie with Informa Connect, and we are here at the National Restaurant Association show in Chicago, Illinois. And today I'm here with RJ from Placer.ai. Welcome, RJ.
Thanks, Stephanie.
So tell me a little bit about Placer.ai. What is it? What do you do?
Yeah, I think the best way to describe us is we're a location-based analytics company powered by mobile data. In simpler terms, that means we are the foot traffic experts. We partner with several hundred mobile app companies, and through those app partnerships, we are able to monitor a panel of 25 million devices on a 24/7 basis. Importantly, we collect no information about that device user. We just know that a device has gone into a certain retail store, how long they go, where they go after. We work with a lot of restaurant, retail, commercial real estate, really anybody who's got physical assets. We work with a lot of them. But beyond foot traffic, we do much more cross-visitation data. We do some customer persona data. We work with other data sets, and we know somebody goes back to a zip code every night. We know that that's probably their home location. We know things about that zip code. We can make inferences so that, check it out if you haven't seen it, Placer.ai. A lot of good stuff, a lot of free resources, but we're the foot traffic experts.
So I know foot traffic is a huge topic of importance and concern to restaurant owners right now, especially with the economic instability and price sensitivity with customers. What are you seeing trend-wise this year compared to last year or even maybe pre-pandemic?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think if you look last year, QSR was generally slightly positive in terms of traffic. Some, like McDonald's, were ahead of that. Some were worse. Full-service dining on a year-over-year basis was down. Some of that was because of restaurant closures. But generally speaking, we've seen those trends actually continue and maybe gotten a little worse. I think we started off on a soft foot with January and weather. That was a negative impact. February and March, we saw slightly positive numbers. And then April started coming back. And I think a lot of consumers are feeling that inflation pressure and still food away from home, inflation being higher than food at home. Restaurants really feeling pressure from grocery stores more than anything else, particularly value grocers. That is where most of the competition is coming in right now. And so I think that instead of just setting your sights on your local restaurant competitor, you got to think more holistically in food retail, because we are seeing a lot of pressures drive people to different locations.
Absolutely. And I want to touch on the weather. I know seasonality, holidays play a big role on foot traffic. So what role do they play? What do you normally see trend-wise?
It depends on the chain. It depends on the concept. But generally speaking, we see a little bit softer in the winter period, a little bit higher in the summer period when people want to be out and dining, particularly full service and casual dining. They do a lot better in the summertime. But you bring up a good question, because events right now, we're seeing a lot of propensity to people to visit restaurants during events, right? Maybe it's the shoulder periods, you're worried about inflation, but hey, somebody's birthday's coming up. I still am going to make an event out of it. And what we see is people going on those peak periods, a lot more visitation. In fact, restaurant visits for holidays like Valentine's Day and Mother's Day and Easter are above where we were pre-pandemic, and people are spending longer time there, so they want to celebrate more. So very event-focused consumer, but it's those shoulder periods right now in between holidays where people are pulling back and being more conscious about what they're spending.
Absolutely. And speaking also to the state of California, so
Yeah.
I know they're dealing with their own issues per se as far as traffic, and even more so as the operation as a whole with restaurants. How have they been impacted this past April with the minimum wage increase?
It's a fascinating question, because we've been looking at it from the beginning of the year through what happened in April 1st when the minimum wage increase went into effect. It was kind of mixed results. There were some times California was ahead of the national average, sometimes below, up until we got to about April. But since April hit, we've actually seen pretty clearly the California as a state and the most major markets in California are running slightly below what we typically see from a year-over-year growth perspective in terms of visits right now. I think we're kind of in that adjustment phase where consumers may be going to the restaurant for the first time, either seeing higher prices or less workers in there. I think we're just starting to see the impact of it. But our data, now that we've got about 4 or 5 weeks of data to look at, it's pretty conclusive that California is starting to see a bit more pressure. And it'll probably only get worse as people start to see the prices on the menu board and kind of adjust to that.
Absolutely. And does Placer.ai, would that help organizations to navigate that pressure and how to plan moving forward?
Yeah, I think in a lot of cases it would. It'd be able to monitor, are we still outperforming our peers? Are we outperforming our national benchmark? Are we seeing a change in where people are coming from? We work with other data providers where we would get some information about the zip codes. Are we starting to see pressure among that lower income consumer? Are we outpricing them? So there's a lot of ways that Placer.ai can help out on that front. Not just identifying, but really kind of building a better strategy around these impact, better understanding where maybe we need to change our marketing strategy, things like that. A lot of different ways we could help out.
Absolutely. And Even outside of California, there's a lot of migration going right now to specific states. So we're talking Texas, the Carolinas, Florida. What has your data been able to spot with that? What trends are we seeing with traffic there?
Yeah, it's a great question because we do see exactly that. I mean, there's some markets that everybody talks about. It's Phoenix, it's Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Austin, it's the Central Florida area, Carolinas. Seen a lot of population growth, but not all population growth is created equal right now because we've seen some markets like Carolinas and Central Florida. It's a higher household income of individuals, a lot of them from the Northeast that have moved in there. In Dallas and Houston, it's actually kind of multi-generational families. A lot of cases, lower household income families that have moved in there. So I think that the message is you've got to understand who's in your trade area right now, because no matter where you live in the country, no matter big town, small town, urban, suburban, rural, your trade area has changed since the pandemic, and you got to be aware of what's going on. Hey, you know who your customer base, what your restaurant works well with in terms of customers. Well, that may have changed. They may be in a rural city right now. Maybe it's time to look at a smaller market and things like that. But it's been fascinating to look at, where people have moved to, and then also the behavioral changes that have taken place in those markets.
Are certain segments of the industry impacted differently depending on where people are moving to?
Yeah, I think they are. It's been interesting in terms of just what kind of concepts we've seen. And honestly, if we look at kind of the smaller markets, that's where a lot of the populations move to. There was the big movement right out of the pandemic. We saw movement away from major cities like New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles, the southern markets. And then the second wave was really moving away from urban to more suburban and rural. And what's interesting is a lot of times it's the QSR and fast casual guys that are starting to chase the rural market. And it's been interesting. Usually it's kind of they'll start to disrupt some of the incumbents and some of the smaller chains that were already there. That's kind of who they're kind of starting to disrupt. But these markets under 100,000, even under 50,000 people, starting to be a lot more viable. You can go into these markets, less competition, usually it's cheaper build out, usually better access to labor. You're kind of the cool brand and people want to work for you. So it's actually really interesting. And now also we have groups like Chipotle saying, we think we can do 7,000 locations as opposed to 6,000 because we see such success. And honestly, they're doing about 20% higher visits per location in those markets. So I think that's a viable strategy for a lot of QSR, fast casual, and even in some cases, full service restaurants as well. I think what has surprised me is that, there are certain concepts that we are seeing actually be pretty healthy, sit down concepts that are doing really well. And what's really been interesting is the idea that I think out of the pandemic, a lot of the established casual dining and fine dining chains really were, on stable footing. They were taking share from the independents that a lot of times either had to streamline operations or went out of business altogether. But about 18 months or so, we started to see this reversal. And a lot of times driven by the mall owner and operators, a lot of times it's driven by the own success. There's a lot more demand for kind of unique brands and things that stand out. And so we're seeing a lot more success for some of these independent players. Sometimes the entertainment players, so the Dave & Buster's, Putt Shacks, Pinstripes of the world, or even kind of the more experiential Kura Sushi or Gen Korean Barbecue. There's a lot of demand for something new, and it's amazing. Some of these concepts are the ones that are driving most of the traffic to these shopping centers right now. So, I think it's, sit-down restaurants are by no means, the category's not dead. It just needs some innovation, and when you bring that innovation, you're in demand right now.
So what I'm hearing is that experience, there's a huge focus on experience.
Yes.
There has to be more than just sitting down and eating food. And then additionally, that standing out is really important. People want to feel like they're going to something unique or different. They want something that hasn't been experienced before or is unique to what they're normally seeing.
It's exactly right. And it ties back to what we talked about earlier, where people right now are being a lot more discretionary with their household budgets. And so when they do go out, they want something totally unique and they want to spend more time there. They want to enjoy it. And so I think that's kind of the message, is that you got to give people a reason to come out right now. Otherwise, they're not going to do it because they are under budget constraints. But they have shown the willingness to go out and spend and make a big event out of it. And so when you do that, when you give them that satisfaction, they will come.
I think that's a great point, that consumers are being very selective right now.
Very much so.
So you really have to put your mindset in that of the customer. And if you only had to choose one place, you want to make sure you're the place
you're the
that
destination.
They want to choose.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So is there anything else that you want to touch on with Placer.ai? What does the future look like with Placer.ai?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, right now, we just crossed 4,000 customers. We are now 100 million in ARR. We work with groups all the way from shopping mall owners and operators to retailers to restaurants to even cities themselves. And I think just the future is continuing to build out not only the customers we help, solutions to, really good with real estate decisions, marketing, strategy, operation decisions, but then also just the other verticals that we're working to, new areas, industrial and healthcare, and really just also adding new solutions. I mean, things like being able to forecast what markets are the best fit for your restaurant and what sites within those markets. We've got a great tool on that. Migration tools, understanding where people are moving to and the changes. Again, I think it's so important to know your trade area right now. There's been so much change in that. We've had a lot of restaurant operators come to us and say, hey, this market's worked for us for years. Why is it not working now? And usually comes down to migration. So it really comes down to expanding new verticals and expanding our functionality. But stay tuned. We've got a lot to come on that front.
Wonderful. Well, RJ, I really appreciate you for your time. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.